December 6, 1945, the Federal Reserve Building, Washington, D.C. British economist John Maynard Keynes, perhaps the greatest economic mind of the century, sat across from American negotiators. He was begging. Britain needed money desperately to import food, to buy raw materials, to rebuild, to avoid economic collapse. Keynes had traveled to Washington hoping for a grant, or at least an interest-free loan, some gesture of gratitude from America to Britain, the ally that had stood alone against Hitler for 2 years. What he got was a loan at 2% interest, with devastating conditions. The American negotiators presented their terms. Britain must abandon imperial trade preferences. Britain must make sterling convertible within 1 year. Britain must open its empire to American goods. Britain must effectively accept client status. Keynes signed. Britain had no choice. December 13th, 1945, the House of Commons debated the American loan. Winston Churchill, now leader of the opposition, rose to speak. The loan would hinder Britain's imperialistic spirits and their relationships with their colonies. He saw it clearly. Accepting American terms meant surrendering the empire. But Britain was bankrupt. The loan passed. Open loop number 1. Here's the question nobody asks. What really ended the British Empire? Was it World War II? The devastation? The exhaustion? The bankruptcy? Was it debt? The £21 billion that crushed Britain financially? Or was it America, the rising superpower that dismantled Britain's empire piece by piece while claiming to be an ally? Saws. The conventional story says World War II weakened Britain so much it couldn't hold its empire. But what if that's incomplete? What if America didn't just witness British imperial decline, but orchestrated it? Through Lend-Lease agreements that drained British assets, through loan conditions that forced decolonization, through diplomatic pressure that undermined British authority. What if the Atlantic Alliance was actually American imperialism?
September 1939. Britain stands alone. When Germany invaded Poland, Britain declared war. For the next 21 months, until June 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union, Britain fought essentially alone. France collapsed in 6 weeks. The Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression pact with Germany. America remained neutral. Britain stood against the most powerful military machine in Europe, with no allies, running out of money. Cash and carry. At first, Britain bought American weapons with cash, the cash and carry policy. But Britain was spending money catastrophically fast, tens of millions of pounds per week, buying planes, ships, weapons, ammunition. By late 1940, Britain was nearly broke. November 23, 1940. Britain's ambassador to the United States, Lord Lothian, arrived at New York's LaGuardia Airport. He held an impromptu press conference. "Well, boys, Britain's broke. It's your money we want." Churchill questioned the diplomatic tact, but it was no exaggeration. Britain had run out of money to fight Hitler. Roosevelt's solution. President Franklin Roosevelt faced a problem. He wanted to support Britain, but America was officially neutral. Lending money to warring nations violated neutrality laws. So Roosevelt invented Lend-Lease. The idea: America would lend weapons to Britain. After the war, Britain would return them or pay for them at a discount. It sounded generous, like helping a neighbor whose house was on fire. But there were conditions, hidden costs, strategic objectives. The Atlantic Charter, August 1941. August 14th, 1941. Roosevelt and Churchill met aboard warships off Newfoundland. They signed the Atlantic Charter, a statement of shared wartime goals. Among the principal, August 1945. Lend-Lease ends. August 21st, 1945. 2 weeks after Japan surrendered. President Truman, who'd taken office in April, abruptly canceled Lend-Lease. Large quantities of goods were in Britain or in transit when the Lend-Lease Act was terminated on 21 August 1945. Britain had been counting on continued aid for post-war reconstruction. Suddenly, nothing. Many governments felt let down by this decision. Truman later admitted the program should have continued longer, but the damage was done. The shock. The U.S. decision to cut off wartime Lend-Lease arrangements abruptly after VJ Day in August 1945 was a shock to Britain's newly elected Labour government. Think about the timing. Labour had just won a landslide. They promised massive domestic reforms, nationalized health care, housing, welfare programs. All of it required money Britain didn't have. And now, America had cut off the lifeline. Britain faced heavy global commitments, providing food for colonial territories, coal to liberated Europe, responsibility for the British zone in Germany. A massive domestic reform program, zero American aid, £21 billion in debt. Britain was trapped. Keynes goes to Washington. December 1945. John Maynard Keynes traveled to Washington to negotiate. He hoped for $6 billion as a grant, or at least an interest-free loan. He emphasized Britain's wartime sacrifice, the years standing alone, the devastation endured. Surely America owed Britain gratitude? American negotiators were unmoved. The American position. Congress and the American public have never accepted any literal principle of equal sacrifice, financial.
American anti-colonialism. America positioned itself as anti-colonial, champion of freedom, opponent of European empires. But American anti-colonialism wasn't purely idealistic. American pressure for Indian decolonization grew from the Atlantic Charter's principles around 1941, emphasizing self-determination and rights. But also, America wanted access to markets controlled by European empires. An independent India trading freely was better for American corporations than British-controlled India with tariffs protecting British goods. The India question. Throughout World War II, Roosevelt pressed Churchill on India. Why was Britain fighting for freedom in Europe while denying it in Asia? The hypocrisy was glaring, and Roosevelt used it. Churchill resisted, famously said he hadn't become prime minister to preside over the dissolution of the British Empire. But Roosevelt persisted, quietly, diplomatically. The message was clear. American support came with expectations. 1947. American pressure intensifies. By 1947, American pressure on Britain to decolonize had become overwhelming. The United States supported Indian independence through diplomatic channels, economic leverage, public statements. Not out of pure idealism, though that mattered, but because an independent India aligned with American strategic interests. The Marshall Plan, 1948. America offered Europe $13 billion in Marshall Plan aid for reconstruction. But Marshall aid came with conditions: European cooperation, economic integration, open markets. And for Britain, continued pressure to dismantle imperial preferences. America was rebuilding Europe on American terms, in ways that benefited American corporations. The Marshall Plan wasn't charity. It was strategic investment in American economic dominance. Suez, 1956. The final humiliation. October 1956. Egypt's President Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain, France, and Israel invaded to retake it. America ordered them to withdraw. President Eisenhower threatened economic sanctions, cutting off oil supplies, selling British pounds, crashing the currency, blocking IMF support.
The conventional narrative. The story we're taught. The Allies defeated Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Democracy triumphed over fascism. Britain, America, and the Soviet Union saved the world. All true, but incomplete. Because there were winners within the winners.
Britain's victory. Britain won World War II, militarily. Hitler defeated, Japan surrendered. Britain on the winning side. But look at Britain's situation in 1945. $21 billion in debt, 250% of GDP. Merchant fleet decimated, cities bombed, industries damaged, currency weak, overseas assets sold, dependent on American loans, forced to dismantle imperial preferences. This was victory? America's victory. Now look at America in 1945. Creditor to the world, industrial capacity massively expanded. No bomb damage except Pearl Harbor. Dollar becoming global reserve currency. Military bases across the world. Dominant in international institutions, UN, IMF, World Bank. European empires weakening, opening markets to American corporations. America didn't just win the war. America won the peace. The transfer of power. Between 1945 and 1965, Britain decolonized most of its empire. American corporations expanded globally. The pound declined as a reserve currency. The dollar became dominant. British global military presence contracted. American military presence expanded worldwide. This wasn't coincidental. This was the transfer of global hegemony from Britain to America. The sterling area. After the war, former British colonies remained in the sterling area, their currencies pegged to the pound, reserves held in London. This looked like British influence continuing. But in practice, America controlled it, because the pound was weak, dependent on American financial support, subject to American pressure. When America wanted a colony to decolonize, financial pressure on Britain forced it. The sterling area became a mechanism for American indirect control. The Commonwealth fiction. Britain created the Commonwealth, supposedly maintaining ties with former colonies. In reality, the Commonwealth had little substance. The evidence of intent. Was this accidental or deliberate strategy? The evidence suggests deliberate. Roosevelt's statements. Roosevelt repeatedly expressed anti-colonial views, but not out of pure idealism. He saw European empires as economically inefficient and obstacles to American expansion. Independent nations trading freely equals better for American corporations than closed imperial systems. The Lend-Lease design. The Lend-Lease agreements were carefully crafted to 1. Drain British assets, forcing sale of overseas investments. 2. Extract commitments, opening empire to free trade. 3. Create dependency, Britain reliant on American aid. 4. Position America for post-war dominance. This wasn't charity. This was strategic maneuvering. The loan conditions. The 1945 loan conditions were designed to dismantle the British Empire's economic foundation. Abandoning imperial preference equals ending protected markets for British goods. Sterling convertibility equals exposing pound's weakness. Opening to American corporations equals American economic penetration. If America simply wanted to help Britain recover Britain, these conditions were unnecessary, even counterproductive. But if America wanted to replace British hegemony with American hegemony, these conditions made perfect sense. The timeline proves intent. Look at the sequence. August 21st, 1945, Lend-Lease abruptly ended, forcing Britain to negotiate loans. December 1945, loan agreement with devastating conditions. July 1947, forced sterling convertibility, predictable crisis. August 1947, India independence. Britain couldn't afford to stay. 1948, Marshall Plan, rebuilding Europe on American terms. 1949, pound devaluation, Britain humiliated. 1956, Suez Crisis, American veto of British action. Every step weakened Britain. Every step strengthened.
What really ended the British Empire? War, debt, or America? The answer? All three, working together. But America was the decisive factor. War alone wasn't enough. World War I weakened Britain severely,
but the empire survived. World War II devastated Britain, but devastation alone doesn't explain the rapid collapse. The Soviet Union suffered far worse destruction, yet maintained its empire until 1991. War weakened Britain, but war didn't force immediate decolonization. Debt alone wasn't enough. Britain was heavily indebted after both world wars. After WW1, Britain stayed in debt for decades, but kept the empire. Debt was crushing, but Britain could have stayed in India, Africa, the Middle East while in debt, if it had American support. Instead, America actively undermined British imperial control. America was the catalyst. America made decolonization inevitable through 1. Economic leverage. Lend-Lease and loan conditions forced Britain to dismantle imperial preferences. 2. Diplomatic pressure. Constant American advocacy for self-determination. 3. Financial pressure. Abrupt termination of aid, forcing Britain into impossible choices. 4. Strategic positioning. Replacing British influence with American influence in former colonies. Without American pressure, Britain might have held India longer, fought harder in Africa, maintained Middle Eastern presence. With American pressure, every imperial commitment became unsustainable. The three-factor model. Think of it this way. War equaled weakened Britain's capacity to hold the empire. Debt equaled increased the cost of holding the empire. America equaled removed the option of holding the empire. All three necessary, but America sufficient to force the outcome. Was America malicious? No, America wasn't evil, just self-interested. American policymakers genuinely believed empires were wrong, but they also believed American-led free trade was better for America. The Atlantic Charter wasn't cynical manipulation. It represented real American ideals. But those ideals conveniently aligned with American economic interests. Opposing European empires was both moral